What's going on, everybody? It is Thursday here on the Locked On Network, and you know what that means. It is Crossover Thursday. I'm Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins, joined by Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns. The Browns will be visiting Hard Rock Stadium in South Florida this weekend to play the Miami Dolphins.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
But before we get there, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You can pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 extra money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Mr. Jeff Lloyd, longtime friend. Haven't spoken in a while, though. How are things going for you, man?
This is one of the cool things about, the crossover episodes. And, there's guys we obviously talk to all the time, within the division. I think it's kind of funny, obviously, for your Draft Network folks that you and Joe sit down, do 2 episodes a year. But we all kind of broke in this same time, I guess maybe 7.5, 8 years ago. And all just, some guys trying to just do something that we enjoyed. I think for all of us, I think it's turned into something that we're extremely proud of. And it's become, for me, and I know for you, obviously it's become, a pretty big part of, how we, support and take care of our families. So certainly had this one circled. And actually I get to come right back next week, sit down and talk with Joe as the Browns will be playing the Bills. So that'll be interesting. For the Browns as a whole this season, I'd say it's been weird because the expectations offensively, I think we've not only met the expectations of what we thought Jacoby Brissett could do for this team, we've exceeded them. Defensively is where it's kind of been the issue, and started week 2, with the absolute epic, collapse against the New York Jets and Joe Flacco with 2 minutes to go. And it kind of became a hangover after that for the next couple of weeks where they just couldn't get the right recipe on defense. There were times where, Joe Woods was sending in 2 defensive calls, and it was causing problems as far as the communication with the players on the field, trying to get what they thought was the right call. Ended up with a lot of wide open guys and guys just not on the same page. As the weeks went on, they tried to simplify things, realized that wasn't working. The defense had a strong showing, even though they lost to the Ravens, held Lamar to 9 completions, Mark Andrews, no catches, under 4 yards per carry. They were able to carry that into Monday night. This previous Monday night against Cincinnati Bengals. And, it's weird because Joe Burrow, as great as Joe Burrow is, it just seems like right now he's got that Cleveland Browns Achilles heel. It just doesn't seem to work for him against that franchise. And so that leads, kind of what are, basically the biggest storyline here. And it's weird for the Browns because this season, within this season, there's 2 seasons. There's this 11-game run with Jacoby Brissett. And then there's the final 6-game run, and we'll see what this final 6 games means when this team goes and brings Deshaun Watson into the fold. And obviously the Browns, with everything they invested, they feel this is going to be a difference-making player for them, not as far as the AFC North is concerned, as far as the AFC is concerned, and possibly the NFL as far as the way this team is viewed and the way this team is capable of performing. So, but before we can even get to all that, there's a 3-game stretch here that's going to determine whether or not Deshaun Watson coming back means he's, shaking off the rust, or he's coming back to leading this team to a possible playoff opportunity. You have a game in Miami the following week against Buffalo. We're not sure exactly what's going on there with Josh Allen. If he needs 2 weeks off, that's fine. Take 2 weeks off. I get it. Need a little rest. 17 games is a lot. And then even Tampa. Yeah, they have Tampa after that at home, and who knows what to make at Tampa. Could they be worse by then? Could they be better by then? A franchise that seems kind of stuck in the mud right now. But this is huge because, 3-5, it's a good spot to be in after they started 2-5. Felt good, the momentum coming off that Monday night win. But now you're walking into a game here against Miami, and, Tyreeke Hill and Jaylen Waddle, as much as I had my concerns, how it was all going to work, it's obviously just absolutely blown up. And, nobody else in the NFL can do what they do. Nobody else has 2 receivers as fast as they do in the same group and can put them on the field. So for this Browns, they need a stretch of 2-1 minimum in order for when Deshaun Watson comes back to think you've got a puncher's chance over the next few weeks here. So it all starts on Sunday. riding high. You're riding high off your game being a win. You had 2 weeks to focus, prep for this team. So as much as there's been so many different storylines with this team, and it's going to be the Brissett era, then the Deshaun Watson era, it's all going to come down to this 3-week span. And the Browns, they need this game, desperately need this game, because Baltimore's pretty much got a cruise control schedule from this point going further.
I think it's interesting that you kind of talk about the season within the season, because I think that's what we're in the midst of for the Dolphins as well. Obviously, when you start 3-0 and you beat the Patriots and the Ravens and the Bills, expectations kind of go to a certain place, right? And then Tua Tagovailoa gets hurt on Thursday Night Football, and he misses the next 2 complete games, so he misses over 2.5 games. The Dolphins go 0-3 in that stretch, and now you go from on top of the world, you finally beat the Bills for the first time in 8 games, you're 3-0, well, now you're 3-3, and the Dolphins, coming out of that with the return of Tua on Sunday Night Football against the Steelers, kind of looked at what the schedule was upcoming, and you said, hey, this is a really interesting opportunity to find out, will the real Miami Dolphins please stand up? And we've seen the offensive performance since Tua's come back. They're averaging 27 points per game. You contrast that against, they didn't score more than 17 points in the 3 games that Tua missed time in. So his return has really energized the team. It's created a lot more explosive plays. The yardage is up. They've had 1 turnover in the last 3 games offensively. So you feel really good about that, but you're looking kind of down the road. And I thought it was interesting that Coach Mike McDaniel in the locker room after the Bills game said, hey guys, we got 1 more game. So get your minds right to put in for an opportunity to put an exclamation point on our 10-win season going into the bye. So he referenced a tale of 2 seasons. And for all of the adversity that Miami was hit with injuries early on in the season at quarterback, on the defensive side of the ball, they're down probably 5 defensive backs for the year at this point. For them to have come through that and won some of these closely contested games and had both sides of the balls, whether it's the defense against Pittsburgh or the offense the last 2 weeks against Detroit and Chicago in road games, kind of step up and help you win a game. They are viewing this as kind of the last step on the hurdle before the Dolphins' own stretch run. And when they have the Houston Texans starting that before a 3-game road trip that includes San Francisco, the LA Chargers, and the Buffalo Bills after that Texans game, you kind of look at these games and you say, hey, all the ground that we can establish now is going to be really critical down the stretch because of the intensity of what the end of season schedule is going to look like for the Dolphins, especially that 3-game block in weeks 13 through week 15. So I love that you went there as far as the season within the season. And obviously Cleveland Browns fans are looking to see what that record is going to look like after 11 games. Well, the Dolphins fans very interested knowing that they got some rough travel left on the schedule here when the calendar flips to December. What do you do in these next 2 games against Cleveland and Houston, and how well can you set yourself up to have margin for error to get over the hurdle that you haven't gotten over the last couple of years, which is finishing with winning records but still managing to find a way to miss the playoffs? Before we go any further, whether you're looking to pop the question or you want to make your moment sparkle, Blue Nile can help you make your celebrations even more memorable. As the original online jeweler, Blue Nile offers the largest selection of independently graded diamonds and pieces priced specifically below traditional retailers. Blue Nile has helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring with easy online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as the setting style. So whether you're looking for a fine piece of jewelry to commemorate a special milestone, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find the memorable gift you need at any given budget. Make your moment sparkle with Blue Nile. Go to BlueNile.com and use code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's Blue Nile, BLUENILE.com, code LOCKEDON to save $50 or more on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com, code LOCKEDON. So, Jeff, we've talked about the perspective from each one of these teams, which means it's now time here on the Crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Dolphins and Locked On Browns to talk about how these teams match up against one another. So my question for you is, when you look at the Dolphins, you've mentioned Tyreeke Hill and Jaylen Waddle and the speed at wide receiver, but in the entirety of the roster, what stands out to you as a critical matchup that the Browns are going to have to find the answers for? Because I know I got my punch list for the Dolphins side of things.
I'm going to go with just a tiny one before obviously we get to the big one. It's going to be how they handle the edge rushers this week. Look, you don't face a left-handed quarterback often in the NFL. I mean, you're talking years can go by in between when you see one. The guys play everywhere. So, do you take Myles Garrett? Do you put him on the left tackle, or do you just say go all day? Because he's just got that motor. And some of the other edge rushers, a little more disciplined in understanding, because they lose more battles than they win, unlike Myles Garrett, to get their hands up and disrupt passing lanes. And we've been able to see that, certainly, Jadeveon Clown has made a living doing that. And the rookies and Alex Wright and, of course, Isaiah Thomas have been pretty solid with that to this point, finding ways to contribute that way. For me, with Denzel Ward, almost a certainty to return this week. And normally, the Browns corners, you don't love them in a lot of matchups because, they're thinner guys, they're speed guys. Well, this is a week where that probably helps them a little bit, obviously, with, Tyreeke and, of course, Jaylen Waddle, not being the largest guys in stature. For me, it's going to be the use of Martin Emerson. Now, Martin Emerson had been a starter for a few weeks while Denzel Ward was out, and he has played fantastic to this point. He's got a motor. He's got a chippiness to him. He's got physicality to him. Very, very willing tackler. So my thought process is, do you take him and maybe play him, on either Waddle or Hill and just say, look, beat the daylights out of him for 5 yards. And, then we'll go ahead and, release him to, whatever's behind you, whether you're going to a cover 2 look or a cover 4 look or however you're going to do this, because you're going to have to play your safeties deep against the Miami Dolphins. There's just no way around it. And then he's going to be free to maybe work on Mike Gesicki, backs out of the backfield. But he's an integral piece. When the Browns, the Chargers had that crazy 4th down where they went for it, didn't get it, give the Browns an opportunity. Chargers, Justin Herbert, Mike Williams said, all right, we'll go with the rookie. Well, the rookie almost made them look like morons for even attempting calling the play, not punting it. And, he made the play, and he's done this week in, week out. They called him for a pass interference on Monday Night Football against the Bengals. It was a straight up hold, had the guy held him a little too long. They called PI. It definitely was a hold. But this guy has been integral. And, they understand, even with the fact they signed Denzel Ward to an extensive, lucrative contract extension, that, there's missed time. There's just going to be missed time with a player like Denzel Ward. It's just something you have to deal with. And, some were surprised when Martin Emerson was their first overall draft selection last spring. And, there were a lot of corners slated in that area, but they got something they didn't have: size, length. And from the day he's walked in here, he's been a competitor. He goes at it. When the Eagles were in town for joint practices, Kyle, as you know, over the years, you end up making connections, and, you have connections within organizations. I had somebody with the Eagles there that day text me right away. He's like, man, I don't understand how you guys got this guy where he did. He's a steal. He's ready to go. So this is going to be key because, the Browns have 3 good corners. But what Waddle and Hill can do, and this is where it's crazy, because if you can keep them underneath, then you're tasked with trying to tackle these guys. And it's just not that easy. They're small, they're quick, they explode in and out of their breaks. Their cutting ability for both these guys in the open field is special. So the Browns, it's going to have to be physical. You are going to have to get physical with these 2 guys. And, they don't usually end up, gasping for air. They're not the type of players. But the more you beat on them, the more it's going to hopefully, at least try to slow them down as the game goes on, because athletically and speed-wise, this is a really difficult match for the Browns, and certainly their safeties if they're going to have to bail out cornerbacks this week against this Miami duo.
So I had one question as far as when Miami has the ball before I switch gears, and I want to grill you about when Cleveland has the ball. But what is the middle of the field like for the Browns in coverage? Because that has been the area for Miami that they have just found so much room on the hashes, crossing routes across the middle, kind of putting those second-level defenders in a bind, but they're also going to run a vertical route to kind of lift your safeties out and try and manufacture some space. So when you look at Deion Jones, who was an acquisition via trade, and Sion Takitaki and John Johnson and these middle-of-the-field defenders for the Browns in pass coverage, what's the confidence level in their ability to space the field? Now, you can only mitigate your losses against the speed of Miami, and you're going to have to take calculated risks, but if you think about that dynamic of what the Browns do defensively, what's your appetite for having success in this game?
I certainly have my nerves. Look, John Johnson III and Grant Delpit, but these guys, this is both where they're better than maybe necessarily being on the roof. And obviously that's been shown to this point this year. Deion Jones, when they got into Monday night, I think Deion Jones ended up being a starter that they weren't necessarily ready to say was a starter. You lose your starting middle linebacker in Anthony Walker. You lose your second string middle linebacker in Jacob Phillips. Granted, Jacob Phillips was struggling. And I just don't think Deion Jones had everything they needed yet. Maybe wasn't versed well enough in the nickel and the dime packages to be a success. And I think they looked at it Monday night and said, well, you know what? Taki's been here forever. He knows everything. And the Browns left him on the field. And he had a monster night. He's physical. He's smart. The athleticism certainly scares you in this. But I think it's going to be if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Sione Taki put up together a real nice showing in the Monday night affair against the Bengals. I think the Browns are going to stick with that. And I think they like the fact that even if they do that with him, there's blitzing ability there. And Kyle, as you remember, Sione Taki, when he came out of BYU, there was some pass rushing background in his days in Provo where he was a pass rusher. So they kind of get a guy on the field who can kind of do everything. And, maybe, in their, haste, maybe they overlooked this aspect of, they could have done this with him as he went to a second middle linebacker, a third middle linebacker. But I think over the middle, in that realm, you're going to see a lot of Grant Delpit. And I think you're going to see a pretty good amount of Sione Taki, unless it, shows that maybe it's just not enough athleticism. And maybe you got to make the switch to Deion Jones, who can run a little faster.
As I think about this Cleveland Browns rushing attack, and I think about how good Nick Chubb is, and Kareem Hunt, we've heard a lot about as being a player who was perhaps interested in being traded, but they didn't end up moving him, so they're going to ride with him the rest of the year. This Browns team, with their ability to run the ball, they have 1,300 rushing yards. What is it about this group that makes them so challenging to stop while still acknowledging that you do have a backup quarterback that's playing?
I think the thing is, and, to Coach Kevin Stefanski's credit, he stated this, he felt he was going to, and look, there's going to be different things you run for Deshaun Watson than you run for Jacoby Brissett, but they made the addition of Amari Cooper. They paid David Njoku. They weren't just going to say, well, for 11 games, we're just going to be a straight up running team, so that's, been the thing. They've been able to have pretty good balance. And Jacoby's success certainly has been a big part of it. 2 weeks in a row with 50-yard pass completions to Amari Cooper. That certainly opens things up. But, you go to it and, Bill Callahan's been here for years now with this Browns offensive line. And even look at a player like Ethan Posick, who came in this year, was supposed to be the backup center. 2 snaps into preseason. All of a sudden now Ethan Posick is your starting center. That interior has played well. When you talk about, having 2 guards, these guys are legitimate all-pro contenders season after season. That's how good they are with their pulling, their pinning. I mean, these guys are physical. They sustain blocks. Just really, really good at it. I mean, Nick Chubb, as talented as he is, and I don't want to discredit it at all, but a lot of running backs would be putting up the numbers Nick Chubb is putting up in this system. It's definitely a running back friendly system. These guys are committed to it. But it's also been helpful that they've been able to move the ball like they have because they have been, consistent in the passing game. Jacoby Brissett's completion percentage is high. As the weeks have gone on, he's really been able to drive the ball further down the field. Donovan Peoples-Jones, 4.5 receptions, 70 yards a game over his last 5. Kind of found a way to get everybody involved here. And, the best recipe for offensive success is always diversity and balance. And the Browns have been able to do that. Nick's going to come in here fresh. He's pretty much been fresh the entire season. They're never going to give him, the 30 carries that Browns fans would hope. He would never going to get the Derrick Henry workload, so to speak, in a game maybe where the Browns need it. The Browns want him fresh in the fourth quarter. They don't want him being a spectator in the fourth quarter like we saw Derrick Henry last Sunday night. So the Browns are really, really smart, balanced, diligence. It's been fun to watch here. And I think Jacoby Brissett, again, has exceeded expectations of what he could do for this team.
And what is the status of David Njoku, who's obviously a super talented player, and he got an extension from a contract perspective? I know he's missed a little bit of time with an ankle injury, but I look at him, and the tight end position has been a group for Miami as they've started to lose secondary players. Their ability to play matchups has become a little bit mitigated. So I look at David Njoku's presence for Cleveland, and I have my questions on, are you going to stick Eric Rowe on him and have him shadow him and play man-to-man coverage, which he had success with in 2019 and 2020, but not so much recently? So that could be a potential pain point for the Dolphins when Cleveland has the ball. What's the status for David Njoku as you understand it at this point in the week?
From today, David Njoku, off to the side, doing some spending time with the extra coaches, obviously. David Njoku says he's going. And there's been footage, and just to see, there's one thing to walk without a limp as opposed to trying to run. David Njoku, obviously this game, holds some meaning for him. You don't go back to Miami every year when you're in the AFC North. And, David obviously had some time, his time down there as a Hurricane. I really, really think there's going to be some way he tries to contribute because he understands that this is a step up from the Cincinnati Bengals, this game. The Browns were able to, offset that in their last game without David Njoku. But then it's getting tougher for Jacoby Brissett when you don't have David out there because David, it was kind of his guy. Amari Cooper, the relationship ran hot and cold as far as, amount of success they had. But week in, week out, David Njoku was a guy who was always highly involved. And, as you talked about, yesterday, just earlier, you get to that 5 to 10 yard range in between the hash marks. And for quarterback, that's a spot you can always see. Even if you're moving right, you're moving left, you can always have your eye on that area. And David Njoku was magical earlier in the year to this point and made everybody basically kind of eat their words as far as the production he was able to put up. So, it'll be paramount. We won't know minimum till Friday. My guess will be game time decision. And the thing that's tough here is the Browns are normally cautious in this situation. The Browns are more of a, hey, if you're 75 this week, that means you're 90 next week. Let's try and get through it. But I don't know if the Browns are in a position where they can afford to lose this game if David Njoku isn't a part of it.
It's about time for some matchups and predictions here, Jeff.
No question. We're going to continue here on Crossover Thursday, Locked On Dolphins with Kyle Krabs, Jeff Lloyd from Locked On Browns. We're going to get back here, get some final thoughts here, matchups, predictions for Sunday. Browns, Dolphins, Browns, and a big, big one. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, we've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and the easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Again, crossover Thursday, Locked On Dolphins, Locked On Browns. We got into some thoughts here, some big storylines between the teams. We talked a little bit here, matchups. Kyle, I just want to get to this here. Now, obviously, there's been a little movement in the running back room with Miami recently. Mm-hmm. Is this something where, because I like what the Dolphins did here by the deadline. What do you normally, you start thinking with a closer mentality. You can never have enough defensive linemen, so you want to know what? Let's go get another pass rusher. We're not totally sold on our running game. You go and make the move they did to bring in Jeff Wilson here. Is this something, they don't necessarily, you have to run the ball. They don't necessarily have to run the ball, but you got to show something different. And plus, you have to have the closer mentality, when you get to, 8 minutes in the fourth quarter, 6 minutes in the fourth quarter. And, you don't necessarily, want to be throwing the ball over. You want to kill some clock, want to run some clock. Is this something that can be done to improve this team?
Yeah, I certainly think so. And with the injuries that we acknowledged in the defensive back room for Miami, having another pass rusher who can win organically and you can play with that extra body or two and not have to blitz so much. Now, ironically, they blitzed the Bears last week at the highest rate in which they have blitzed all season long. And I think some of that had to do with the Bears doing some half-field reads and rollouts and leaving extra eligibles in protection, and the Dolphins saying, okay, well, we're going to add those guys onto the pressure if you're going to stay in and block. So I think that probably facilitated that number. But you saw a lot of Melvin Ingram, Jaylen Phillips, Christian Wilkins, and Bradley Chubb in four-man fronts and obvious passing situations. And that group, you're obviously very excited about the physical potential of it with four former first-round selections across that group with varying degrees of experience. So they certainly started to show some signs of some adjustments with their rush group. And then offensively rushing the ball. Jeff Wilson actually came in week one of his time with the Dolphins and took more snaps than Raheem Mostert did. And Mostert had been steadily climbing and commanding more and more of the reps. So I certainly think the Dolphins, they've played from a lead in the last couple of games between the Chicago game and the Pittsburgh game, and possessing the football in those critical late game moments, like you said, has been something that's been a bit of a work in progress. But the physicality of Jeff Wilson, I certainly think, brings a different dynamic to their ability to try to do that as compared to Mostert, who is just so explosive getting to the outside, but you don't really see him breaking a lot of tackles and running through congested areas with a lot of consistency.
I see. I can see that. And now you said, of course, with the addition of Chubb, I mean, so what, you go 5-6 deep now at pass rusher. And it's kind of funny you brought up, NASCAR, if we're still using the term, because the Browns have tried and go that route too, because they're just not getting anything out of their defensive tackle play. Look, I mean, although all the 6'4", 6'5", 270-pound guys with long arms, as many as you can get, go ahead and string them together.
Get them. Yep. Yeah, it's these new rush package groups where they're going for speed, and fun seeing who's lining up inside, whether it is a Jadeveon Clowney or for Miami's sake, it's been Jaylen Phillips that's often in that 3-point, and you either let him fire a gap or loops through and play a stun inside, and that explosiveness can really pop. So it'll be fun to see how these two offensive lines sort out those opportunities with all these rushers inside.
Well, I guess we kind of have to as we start, getting down to predictions. As the time that we sit down to film these episodes, there's still certainly, questions to be, asked for the Browns. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, pretty much in the same boat as David Njoku, so we don't really know on either of those players. Obviously for me, David Njoku is certainly the more important one over JOK. As much as the Browns, have had issues at the linebacker in that area of the field, they still have 3 safeties they can play. They can still lean on Sione Takitaki. They can still lean on a player like Deion Jones. But for me, I don't, the Browns need to go 2-1 over these next 3 games, because the goal would obviously want to be to get 5-6. When you're trying to go through something like that, obviously you want to start the ball going downhill, the snowball, with a win here. Again, a lot easier said than done. I think the game goes one of 2 ways. I think the Browns win, or the Browns lose by 2 touchdowns. I don't think there's any in between. I think either the Browns show up, they tackle well, they cover well, or they have no answer for Hill and Waddle, and the Browns are back to the secondary issues they had earlier in the season. My heart, my head, and my wallet certainly need for the Browns to make this all come to fruition. And I think with the extra week going into this, and the fact that, look, you should not come in here and get run out of the stadium. You shouldn't. You had a bye week. You're starting to trend back towards the correct side of being healthy. This is a game, and this is a game you absolutely have to have. And I think they're to the point now where they can put all facets together. Cade York, I just don't like what they've done with him. I understand what happened with the Bengals last year and Evan McPherson. That is not your plan, is that your rookie kicker carries you to the Super Bowl. That should never be anyone's plan. It is a poor, poor plan. And that's kind of what they tried to do here a little bit with Cade York. But I think they're going to go in there, and I think they're going to play complete. And one of the biggest reasons why is I think Nick Chubb. I do. And I think Jacoby Brissett, it's a tough spot to be in for Jacoby Brissett, because normally you get handed the ball and you usually get to take it away when you're not playing well. Either way, Jacoby Brissett's done. It's over. And I think Jacoby Brissett is going to leave everything out there and do everything he can for this franchise. So I think it'll be a close one, but I really think the Browns see the writing on the wall and know how important this game is and can come out with a W on Sunday.
Yeah, I think you have the right perspective, Jeff. The Browns need this game. The Dolphins would like to have this game, right? I think there is a difference, and I think you make a great point with the bye week too. Teron Armstead's been playing through some lower body injuries all season long. He missed 1 game. Xavier Howard's been playing with multiple lower body injuries all season long. He looks a step slower. We're at our 10th game now before the bye. I think there's some layers to this that the Browns are going to have in their advantage. Now, I do think the uniqueness of what Miami does from an RPO standpoint and the speed of Waddle and Hill presents unique challenges. But I think this is going to be a really, really well-contested game. It's one of those ones where I think there's going to be 2 or 3 bounces of the ball that's really going to determine the outcome. And I think about special teams. The Dolphins have been a team that has struggled to find positive impact on special teams all season long, up until they had a tipped field goal against the Bills in week 3, and then they had a block punt that was returned for a touchdown last week. And that's about the extent of positive contributions in special teams. So I would not be surprised if a singular turnover or a special teams play is, at the end of the day, what ends up getting this ball to bounce one way or another. But I do Locked On Dolphins. I got to pick the Dolphins to win the game, right? So I'm going to say like 26-24 though. Like, I think this is really going to be a close game. Dolphins fans have been hoping and praying, hey, can we get a game that's not so stressful? I don't think it's going to be this week against the Browns because, Jeff, as you said, they got everything to gain and they have everything to lose as well. The Cleveland Browns do, coming into this game as they try and survive this 11-game stretch.
It's actually funny you said that because we do a post-game show. I go and join the guys from the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. We go live with a 2-minute warning. And the only week it was not where we were sitting there just glued was last week against the Bengals. The Browns definitely play cardiac football. There's no question about it. And, this is one of those ones, buckle up, kids, because for the Browns, you're going to be there, basically whistle to whistle because, this game will go the full 60 minutes as far as having to have your eyes and ears on it.
So it'll be a great game for sure. We hope everybody enjoys it. We hope everybody enjoyed this edition of the Crossover Thursday. If you did, make sure you hit subscribe to Locked On Browns, Locked On Dolphins. Stay up to date on both teams and check out all the other great channels and shows that we have here on the Locked On Network for all of your favorite teams, because it's your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. So with Jeff Lloyd, Kyle Krabs, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the game on Sunday, and make sure to check out Locked On Browns and Locked On Dolphins in the post-game aftermath to find out exactly what went down.